And welcome to my program today. A tough column I wrote this week, something that troubled me a great deal. I hope you'll have a chance to take a look at it here on the website. I wrote about New Orleans, a massive crime wave down there. Some 50 people killed or the shot in the past 4 days, a number killed in New Orleans in one evening on Bourbon Street. 10 different people killed in a shootout just a couple of days ago. And this huge amount of shootings just continues to grow. New Orleans always ranks in the top 4 or 5 murder capitals of all of the world, not America, but all of the world. And it just doesn't seem to ever stop. It's very difficult for me. New Orleans is in my DNA, quite frankly. I talked about it this week about how I went to Tulane Law School was when I first came to New Orleans, lived down the French Quarter on Dauphine Street, learned to love the French Quarter. Then when I served in the National Guard, enlisted in the Army, served in the National Guard, part of my station duty was to be in New Orleans. I practiced law in New Orleans. After Katrina, I had a radio program for 3.5 years on WRNO, where I talked about the Katrina recovery. It was on there every day on that radio station. And in the evening, I'd travel throughout all of New Orleans, learned all the restaurants, just became so important in terms of the love I have for that very special city. It's just unique. There's nothing like it. They talk about San Francisco and other cities, but New Orleans is a Caribbean city. It's a world all to its own with Mardi Gras and so many great attributes. For a number of recent years, my wife and I have an apartment down there. Beautiful apartment right over right over Jackson Square in the Pentalba buildings, the oldest apartment buildings in all of America. And we got that apartment, and I didn't get it with any political connections or anything like that. I applied back in 1982. You have to get on a waiting list. And after years and years, a few years ago, I finally came up with my name on the list where we got the apartment. We love the apartment. We're able to have so many great times. I was right across from the St. Louis Cathedral where we went to Mass on regular occasions, all the great restaurants down there. But in the last year or so, during the day, it's just wonderful. I'd sit up on my balcony and listen to all the street musicians. We'd go to visit with all of the tarot card readers and all the interesting people that were around the French Quarter. But then when the sun went down, New Orleans became a different place. The homeless came out in great numbers, sleeping in doorways. In my doorway, I'd open the door early in the morning, invariably there'd be a homeless person there sleeping. And that's terrible. It's a problem, but it still is not very conducive to wanting to be there in the quarter because you worry about your safety. So many other things took place. Some of the strange people that there in the evening. You just didn't want to be out in the street at night. And then the continuing crime built, and it's caused such a huge problem now. As I say, 10 people shot on Bourbon Street just in one incident alone just a few days ago. And so I wrote this column by the headlines, by the way, in both papers. The New Orleans Advocate said an unconscionable act. The New Orleans Times-Picayune, it was a panic, talking about all the things. And the Queen City is just under siege. This just doesn't stop. I don't know the solution. I've been in government for a long, long time. Some people are projecting having a no weapon zones in all of the entertainment area of the French Quarter. Just very hard to enforce, though. You're going to go ahead and pat down every person or going through metal detectors to get into the French Quarter. How do you enforce something like that with the hundreds of thousands of people that on a busy weekend will flock into that particular area? Beefing up state police has been proposed, but when the shootings took place with 10 people killed in New Orleans, within about 30 seconds, there were about 25 or 30 officers on the scene. They were just a half a block away. So will more police beef it up? You've got police everywhere down there, and it doesn't seem to make that big of a difference. But something's got to be done because, I had a close friend, Walker Percy, the marvelous novelist, considered America's greatest Catholic novelist, wrote so many great books. The Moviegoer won him the Pulitzer Prize. And I can go on about my friendship with Walker Percy, who I knew back in the 80s before he died. But I remember him telling me when I visited with him about New Orleans, he loved New Orleans. Almost of his stories centered around New Orleans. And he said New Orleans ought to be much more than a slightly sleazy playground for tourists and conventioneers. And until you get this crime underway, it's not going to be much more than that. Industry just doesn't want to come into a city like that. And it's going to take more than just the mayor. The mayor is trying his best. I know the mayor down there personally. He is giving it his best shot, but more needs to be done. It's going to take the governor and the mayor and the 2 U.S. senators and a concerted effort to try to zero in on those who are trying to destroy that great city. And there are some social problems that obviously have a bearing on what happens down there. Obviously, education. There are so many programs you could put into place, but it costs millions and millions and millions of dollars and takes a long period of time. And people want some kind of a response right now. So it's a tough article to write. And I mentioned I had an apartment down there. Unfortunately, we're moving. We've decided we just can't be there in the evening. It's just not safe. And we've decided to move out of New Orleans. And it's a tough thing to do. I wish that wasn't the case. And I certainly pray for the city. I hope for the city. I don't want this to continue, but I'm not keeping my fingers crossed because they've got a long, long way to go. Be back.